I'm delighted to welcome, well, not so much a very old man, but a representative of a very old institution. We have Jerry Rajesh, who is Global Head of Quality Management at Brown Brothers Harriman. And he is responsible for leading a transformation in the way that that institution manages quality development and quality delivery. Brown Brothers celebrated its bicentenary just 2 years ago. The managing change at such an established organization is always going to be a challenge. And I'm very grateful that Jerry is also one of my collaborators in developing the QA Vector Analytics, the new benchmarks that we have for measuring quality and measuring return on investment in quality. Jerry is going to talk to us today about the how you implement and deliver transformation in quality and how he's done that at Brown Brothers. So Jerry, over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. And if there are anybody from Asia, good evening. Good to see you all in a complete virtual session. It's going to be pretty exciting. I'm sure the next 30 minutes. So what, I hope everybody can see my screen. So what we are going to talk about here today is about testing transformation and how do we manage testing transformation. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm not going to talk about or give any kind of prescribed formula because there is none. And I'm sure as we walk through my slides and as we walk through my presentation, you will actually understand and appreciate why there cannot be a prescribed formula, right? It's an interesting time when we talk about testing and especially testing transformation, because the way I see it, most of the financial services institutions today either are going through a testing transformation or actually talking about a testing transformation. So it is a pretty well-timed topic, and I'm sure you will all have a pretty useful session listening to what I'm going to talk about. So okay, technology challenges. So before we start going into talking about testing transformation as such, we need to first really understand what are the drivers for the testing transformation. And I'm going to tie this back in our later slides on why this is very important, right? And typical things that we see, and I'm sure many of you would have seen this or some of this, is the need for the testing transformation. Sometimes it is the production quality. Because of high number of production issues, there is a need derived that, we need to transform our testing approach or testing organization or the way we do testing, right? Sometimes it's about, audits, right? Either internal or external audits or even client audits that kind of makes us move into a testing transformation. Sometimes it is the business that's complaining about bottlenecks or slow speed or lack of automation or whatever it could be, right? Sometimes it's the firm that realizes that we are actually spending too much money on testing. And I've been through some of the organization where that realization came over a period of time where people realize that the cost of testing is high, right? And interestingly, in one of my organization, the testing transformation was, a very different transformation because the CIO went to Google for a two-day tour, Google headquarters, and came back and said, okay, we are going to do a testing transformation. We are going to let go the entire QA team and we are going to hire SDETs, right? And that is also a reason sometimes that can happen. Or somebody goes to a conference, he has a great topic and wants to do a testing transformation just like this, right? Most often or not, and I'm sure many of you will relate to this, many a times testing transformation happens because there is a new boss in town, a new CIO, a new CTO, who basically comes in and says, okay, we've got to look at every aspect of a software development life cycle, and testing becomes an interesting and important topic, and that's why we start. Now, I want you to remember these drivers because, as I said, in the later slides, when we talk about, how do we get there and what do we not do, we're kind of going to tie back to some of these drivers because these drivers are going to be the primary thing that we are going to think about when we talk about testing transformation. Now, this would have been a very interesting slide if I was seeing you all, and if it was an in-person conference, but I'm not going to complain. But what I really want to ask everyone is, what do you see wrong in this picture, right? Um, and for the ones which have very, very keen eyesight, I'm sure you would have noticed, this is a hypothetical scenario. Of course, you know, I'm bringing it in context with Juba City, has a 10 million population, 5% of them have access to reliable electricity. And if you notice the picture, right, there is a Tesla dealership. Now you might think that this is ridiculous, and I do agree with you, but that is what I feel when the first step that people talk about testing transformation is test automation, right? Or the first thing that they say about testing transformation is, oh, we are going to build a quality engineering shop, right? Now, I am a test automation engineer by career. That's how I've developed my career. So I'm a huge proponent of test automation. And this should not be seen as a way for me to discourage test automation, because I feel test automation is very, very important and very, very critical to the success of any transformation, especially testing transformation. But then that cannot be our starting point. And more and more, I'm seeing many organizations trying to take that as a first step. So we talked about what not to start with. Let's just talk about, you know, why testing transformation is complex. Now, you know, compared to all IT transformation, testing transformation has its own challenges and has its own complexity, because unlike an IT transformation where you are either client-centric or business-centric, testing transformation has two different and opposite stakeholders, right? One is business, which sees the output of the testing team or testing transformation. The other one is your technology organization, which is going to be an integral part of your testing transformation, but at the same time could be your clients too, right? So we've got to balance the objectives and drivers and the need, right? And one of the reasons why testing transformation becomes complex is because organizations are a very complex piece of machinery, right? And for us to, you know, come up with a really good testing transformation, we need to first understand the ecosystem of the organization. And that is going to be very, very important. And that is why I said there isn't going to be a prescribed formula, because the transformation and the steps to transformation may vary based on the structure, based on the organization, right? And here are some aspects that we need to think about and that we need to really delve deeper into, right? The first and foremost is the team, right? And as I said, financial services organizations are large, complex organization with different teams, each team having different maturity levels, you know, different in line with the technology trends, and to a certain extent, different tolerance levels too, right? Some business lines are more in adapt to newer technologies, newer trends. Some are not, either by design or by history, right? The second thing that to think about is organization structure. Things to think about is, how is technology aligned? What lies between technology and business? Is this a flat organization? Is there a structure in between? Many financial services organizations may have a change management organization, which kind of acts as a bridge between the technology and business. What is the integration of technology and business? Because these are things that we need to really, really understand well before we come up with a testing organization or testing organization structure, right? Processes. This is crucial, because we need to understand what are the current development processes, right? Is it a waterfall driven organization? It is a agile driven organization, or is it a hybrid organization? And many financial services organization, including ours, is hybrid organization, right? Where there are legacy systems which are core to our functions, but at the same time, we also have new technologies which are more and more being adopted. So understanding that and you know, is going to be very, very crucial, right? Process rigor. Some organizations are really, really stringent about their processes. They have gates, they have cycles, and they have phases. Some not so much, right? Something that we kind of forget are also about the permissions, entitlements, and access control. How do those work? Because for us to clearly come up with an efficient organization structure, an efficient transformation, we need to also understand all the different aspects or steps that we need to go through. Um, Another one that sometimes we tend to forget is the location strategy, right? Where are the development teams based out of? How does the distribution of development teams or even the current testing teams between distribution between FTEs and consultants, right? How many different vendors are there who are part of the technology organization? Where are they based? How are they based? Because those are going to be very, very important factors, and I'll explain to you why those are important factors in the next few slides. Also understanding the current testing landscape. Sometimes we go into an organization with a transformation where there isn't a testing organization. Sometimes there is a testing organization but not really matured or not necessarily aligned with what the new drivers are, right? And so understanding that is going to be very, very crucial. And last but not the least is technology stack, right? What kind of technology stack is in the organization? Most financial services, as I said, will have some kind of a hybrid technology stack. There will be mainframe, there will be legacy applications, but at the same time, there will be cutting edge, latest and greatest technology too. So understanding that is also going to be very, very crucial. And this for me has always served as a really, really good template as to start, because this kind of now, kind of channelizes ourselves into understanding, okay, what the drivers are, what is the ecosystem of the organization. Now, depending on them, how do we come up with the transformation strategy that is going to be one, efficient, two, effective, and three, successful, right? And so that's why I really wanted to actually spend some time on this slide, because far often we kind of miss this point. Now, I said there is no prescribed formula for testing transformation, but what I'm trying to talk about here are basically, some of the high level steps and kind of the sequences that you would follow for your testing transformation, and how it is going to be important, right? Now, one thing that you would notice is automation strategy is at the end, and that is at the end by design, right? Organizational buy-in, in my view, is going to be the first and foremost, important factor for or step for the testing transformation, right? Now, BBH, I actually interviewed for 6 months, and I actually met about 25 people, some of them even more than once, while I was interviewing, right? And to a certain extent, I was like thinking, why am I going through such a long interview process? But when I joined in, the beauty of the process was, when I joined in, pretty much every stakeholder that I was supposed to face off to, both from business and technology, was almost on board already with the transformation, right? Not necessarily how it's going to be done, but about the overall drivers and overall fact and the approach. Thinking, having the discussion through the interview process. So it is very, very crucial that having an organizational buy-in is going to be probably one of the most important factors, right? Next step is defining the operating model. And we will also talk about the most important question, the operating model, in the next slide. But operating model is about, how is this organization going to deliver? Where is this organization going to report into, right? How is it going to engage both with business and with technology, right? What is the process to delivery, right? Is it going to be a process rigor kind of an organization where it's going to set up documentations and entry criteria and gates and all that stuff? Or is it going to be a more flexible organization in line with the latest development methodologies like Agile or BDD or DevOps, right? So you need to really, really understand and clarify that, right? And kind of ties down to the location strategy and the vendor strategy before, is that we need to really align an organization or build a transformed organization which aligns with your development structures, which aligns with your location strategy, because you cannot end up building a black box organization sitting somewhere completely disconnected, right? Um, the third one is team. And in the challenges slide, I will talk about, what could be the tripping factors in the team, but team is going to be very important, not just the technology teams and the business teams, but the QA teams themselves are going to be a very, very important factor, right? Now you need to understand, as I said, location strategy plays a key role. Locations play the key role because each location has their own characteristics, have their own drivers, have their own motives, and the transformation need to appreciate and align itself with that to ensure success. Otherwise, we're going to face a lot of pushback. Um, um, the next one is tool strategy. Now, when I say tool strategy, it's not about just automation. It's about, what kind of, based on your operating model, based on your team and your location strategy, what kind of tools are right for us? What kind of test management tools? What kind of incident management tools? What kind of ticket management tools? And of course, moving into what kind of automation tools, right? So that tool strategy needs to define itself based on how we want to operate. Again, we are not talking about exact tools. We are talking about what we want to achieve with these tools, right? And lastly, and of course, not the least one, and as I said, it is one of the most important criteria and important facts, is the automation strategy, right? And your automation strategy has to align with your technology stack, has to align with your process, has to align with your teams, and I say both testing teams and development teams, and has to align with the overall approach of your tool strategy. Because trying to build an automation strategy when everything else is broken is going to only result in a broken automation strategy or a very fragmented automation strategy, right? Now, I did talk about operating model, and I did say that, why it is going to be important. And the most important question I'm sure we've all been asked, and I'm sure we will always be asked as long as we are in QA, is do we centralize or not, right? And there isn't a straightforward answer, to be honest. As a QA professional, people might think that I am going to be biased, or we are going to be biased toward a centralized QA organization. But I feel the answer lies in the ecosystem, lies in the drivers, and also lies in the operating model that you're defining, right? Both are good, both have their own strong points, and both have their own not so strong points too, right? In a decentralized organization, of course, you get instant alignment. Stakeholders feel part of control because they think that they have control and they actually have control. Testing is automatically considered an extension of development, right? Because now we are part of them. So that results in quicker implementation, right? It also results in siloed excellence, right? You can have really good solutions in a very, very siloed fashion, and sometimes that is the need. But there are some downsides too, because it kind of misses an enterprise view, because now you are aligned by verticals or line of business, and you're kind of concentrating only on that. Lower reusability, because reusability by and large would constrain itself and confine itself to individual pockets. Sometimes we end up having multiple solutions for the same problem. Testers sometimes feel confined to a smaller area. And actually in BBH, when we were defining our testing strategy, that was another driver for us, because the feedback from the existing team was that they feel constrained within a smaller team, and they want to be part of a larger team where they want to see a career, they want to see a future, right? Of course, there is the last one, and of course, the most important one is independence can be questionable. The quality view of a project, of a program, or of a line of business kind of can be questionable, because you are now part of the development team and you really don't know what to really bring out and what not to bring out. Now, centralized organization kind of works contradictory to the whole thing, right? So you get an enterprise level view, the teams have a larger picture, reusability is high, consistency is at a large scale, because you are trying to now, because one of the, I'm sure, criteria that you will develop is consistency across the organization. and you really bring out the independent view of quality, because your quality organization has its own structure, has its own say in the organization. Of course, it has its own downsides too. Implementation can be slow. Challenging stakeholder management, because of course, now stakeholders' priorities and your priorities may be different or may be perceived as different. Higher risk of misaligned priorities, because as a separate quality organization, your priorities kind of may be different from, or could be different from, your development organization, and that may lead to some kind of friction, right? The fourth point is service center mentality, and this I have seen in few organizations myself, either through experience of living through them, or through peers and discussions. Is sometimes the quality organization starts behaving like a service center, right? You give me your inputs, I'll give you a product, or I'll give you a tested view, right? And that becomes a difficult point, right? And lack of transparency. Sometimes, depending on how you set the operating model, the transparency can be sometimes lost, and I have seen it being lost. So depending on, as I said, there are like 5 points each, both positives and negatives. Depending on what is more important for your organization, we need to really define which is the right approach, right? Sometimes decentralized is the right approach. Sometimes centralized is the right approach. And this is what I said, there is not going to be a prescribed formula, and there should not be a prescribed formula. And sometimes we switch back and forth also. And that's part of the cycle that, testing transformation cycle that I'm sure we have all gone through multiple times. Now, this is the last slide. I really wanted to talk about some of the challenges that we could face, that I have faced in my career. And I'm sure, all of us would when we are in the testing transformation. Senior stakeholder buy-in is there, but dissemination of that buy-in down the organization sometimes is not there, right? End of the day, testing transformation is both a top-down and bottom-up approach. If the top level agrees, but the people at project manager, tech manager level do not really agree, it is going to be a challenge implementing. Organization structure could be a challenge, right? Current maturity of the organization definitely is going to be a challenge, because depending on which spectrum they are, the speed in which you can implement and how much hurdles you face while implementing could be challenging, right? Budget for transformation is definitely there, because a lot of times we get into an organization where the intention is there, but the budget isn't. So, really coming across that could be a challenge, right? And time to build consensus. Like, are we a consensus driven organization? If we are, how long does it take to build that consensus? And if we are not, how quickly we can do it? But then that kind of takes the other point, saying that, okay, do stakeholders now feel accountable, right? People challenges. And the most important point I want to pick from here is because one of the organizations that I was working for, it was the QA team which was the most resistant to the transformation, right? Not the development teams, not the business, but the QA team, right? Based on the history, based on how people have worked over the years, and maybe the existing leaders in the QA organization, it was the QA team that was pushing more back. So that was a surprise to me in that organization. But that is a good learning for me, which I now apply, is that never forget the QA organization and never assume that they will be automatically on board because this is a testing transformation. And another important thing is, balancing between the domain expertise and testing expertise, because, by and large, most of the times when we walk in, we see a lot of domain expertise, not necessarily testing expertise. And that is going to be a big challenge. Lastly, the perceived challenges. And this is the most difficult part, right? Because other two challenges are open, visible, and transparent, but these are challenges that we will have to keep our eyes and ears open for, right? There may be perceived challenges saying that, oh, testing transformation will take a lot of investment, right? It means doing a lot of automation, right? People automatically assume that we are going to automate everything, right? Testing transformation will end up reducing time to market, because now we have to go through many steps before we release. Earlier, we didn't have those steps, right? Testing transformation results in lack of transparency, because, the development team would not know what exactly the testing team is doing. And most important, perceived challenges that, I have experienced in the past is testing transformation does not need a QA expert, right? Anybody can do it. And I've seen in many organizations, when a testing transformation is run by someone who has never run a QA organization before, or doesn't really understand QA, who doesn't really understand what QA really means, right? With that, as I said, the key takeaway for us is that, testing transformation is crucial. Testing transformation is complex. There isn't a prescribed way. The best way to approach a testing transformation and manage a testing transformation is to first understand the drivers, second, understand the ecosystem of the organization, then defining a model that aligns with both of them, and third, defining your success criteria. And I think I'm right on time. With that, I'll stop and I'll open up for questions.
Jerry, thank you. That was very interesting. If you wanted to take the slide down, then yeah, our audience will have the pleasure of seeing us. I had a question that was posed by Dr. Sudhakar Ava of CNA Insurance, and I'm going to, Dr. Ava, with your permission, just modify the question slightly. He suggested that one way of thinking of the cost of quality is to say that testing is the cost of quality, but I'm going to put to you that maybe one has to take into account both the cost of testing and the cost and effort of remediation that follows the testing. But that's also part of the cost of quality. That's something I think we've seen in our analytics process. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I completely agree with that. And the cost of testing cannot be just a direct cost, right? There are definitely indirect costs. And as I said, remediation is just one aspect of it. But what we also need to look at, and sometimes that is not very clear, is what do we really spend on testing? Actually, in our organization, we have gone through a testing transformation, but we are actually going through a transformation version 2 now, because we're talking about, yes, we have transformed the QA organization, but have we really transformed the rest of the organization from the business side, from the QA point of view? Because we still think we probably spent too much money there, right? So we need to look at holistic cost rather than just the testing cost. It's remediation, it is rework, and it's a cost of production, right? How many issues do we have in production? Do we have like a cost of defect? Can we associate the lack of downtime, or non-quantifiable things like reputation and things like that also into cost of testing?
That's a very interesting point. Working with one of our vendors, we have now added into our analytics process an evaluation of the design phase, which is, I guess, before you even start developing, all the way through to an evaluation of the customer satisfaction with the deliverable. Right. Because quality, in many ways, testing is a tool that's used to deliver quality, but quality breaks the whole process. That seems to come out in the challenge that you described of centralization versus decentralization. You have expertise in testing, which facilitates quality, but if you go to a totally decentralized agile model, you risk to have a weakening of that expertise. Have you seen that problem, and if so, how have you addressed that?
Yes, and that is where I was talking about hitting the right balance between the domain expertise and testing expertise, right? Because in a decentralized organization, the approach could be, as I said, very siloed, right? And there is the mentality of siloed excellence, right? And a solution that has been defined or derived in one particular problem may not really automatically translate to all to all the other organizations, right? And that is why, in my view, what we have done right now in BBH is kind of aligned our testing organization by lines of business. Even though we are a centralized organization, within our centralized organization, we have aligned by business. So business feels, the testing organization understands their priorities because we are aligned and we building domain expertise. But at the same time, since we are a centralized organization, we share solutions across, right?
Sorry, forgive me. I think we're out of time. So I'm going to thank you. And thank you so much. Thank you very much, Jerry. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.